Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Grotto in the Tar Pit. We have a great guest for you. His name is Andrew Jones, so please, everybody, welcome him. How you doing, Andrew?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
Good, good, man. As soon as I heard about you, I reached out to you. I know we're gonna have you on another show for Dr. Hogan, but I really wanted to talk to you myself. So I kind of just want to start off by asking who you are and if you can tell us how you came to faith.
Well, okay. My name is Andrew Jones. Originally, I'm from different parts of the U.S., but I grew up in Ohio, Montana, and California, and that's where I was before I left here and moved over here to Turkey. Um, and so I've been going back and forth to the Middle East since 1997. That was my first trip to Turkey, and then 3 years later, I came back to Turkey, and then we went to Israel and Egypt. And what got me into all of this was the Ron Wyatt. Um, just a little backstory on my part. So, growing up, I was raised in a Christian home. We had morning and evening worship. Went to church every weekend. Read the Bible, have our personal prayers and devotions. Went to a Christian school for part of my life, and even public school I went to. So I had a mixed background there in education, but always had a desire to learn more about the Bible. I was always fascinated by biblical archaeology, genealogy, the history in the Bible. And so, as a child, when I heard about this man who claimed he had discovered Noah's Ark in Mount Sinai, he came out to Sacramento, California, where we lived at the time, and he was going to do a one night presentation on all these topics. It was a Thursday night, so it was a school night. And I was a kind of a geek back then, and so I had homework. I didn't want to get messed up on my homework, so I asked my father. I said, "Dad, can you go hear what this guy has to say and come back and give me a report?" And my dad was down for that. And he was always into this stuff too, so I think that's where I got my interest in all this. And when he came back, he said, "Wow, this one man said he found everything," and that really got me interested. So I found out that Ron had written a book called "Discovered Noah's Ark," and this is a small book, but the local bookstore had it, so I bought it. But it was very brief on all his different claims of discovery, and so I knew I had to ask him more questions. I had so many questions. Again, I was in middle school, so this was 1990 or 91, and so I was 14 years old at the time. So this is before the internet, and so there was no websites to go look up information or emailing. And so I called 411. And it had his name and city and a PO box. So it was Madison, Tennessee. It was in the front of this book. And so I called 411, which is the operator service back then. I don't know if it still works today, but the person who answered, they wanted to know what city I wanted a phone number for. And I said Madison, Tennessee. Then they asked for the name. I said Ronald Wyatt, and they gave me a phone number. In fact, they connected me through. And so the phone was ringing, and Ron picked up. And so I'm this kid, and I'm just like surprised that he picked up, and I'm stuttering around. But he told me really briefly, he said, "I just got back from the Middle East. Please call me tomorrow. I'll be happy to answer your questions." So I just couldn't wait to call him. And so the next day I did. I called him. I remember that first two times, I called him twice in a row that week. And those first two calls were like 2 hour long calls. And so I would, after that, talk to him a lot. I'd always call him on the phone. But I was just really interested in studying this out and find out like what was true and did he really find Noah's Ark. But I also talked to people who didn't believe he had found it. I talked to people who worked with him. I talked to David Fazold a lot, who worked with him on Noah's Ark. And then I talked to critics, people who didn't believe he found anything. I just wanted to know like what was their thoughts and different scholars and whatever. And this was all through middle school, high school. Finally, in 1995 and 96, a friend and I, we invited Ron out, and he did a series of meetings in Northern California, and we pulled our resources together to bring him out. And that's when I first met him in 95 and 96. And then 1997, a friend of mine from Florida, Bill Fry, who had started anchorstone.com, he's now passed away too, but he told me, he said, "Hey, Andrew, I'm going on this trip to see Noah's Ark. Just by myself. I don't have a travel companion. Could you come with me?" I was like, "Yes, can I?" And so I talked to my parents. So this was 1997, so I was in college, but I didn't have the money. But my mom, she said, "Hey, look, I'll send you there." And so they came up with the resources, and so like 4 or 5 days I was out here. My first time seeing the site, and just got me more interested. So the 3 years later, I came back, and then I was part of the Wyatt Archaeological Research Crew. That Ron Wyatt passed away in August 1999, but then in 2003 to 2007, Richard Reeves with Wyatt Archaeological Research, kind of the organization that kept going after he died, they got permission to excavate in Zedekiah's cave in Jerusalem and in the Garden Tomb right across the street. And this is where Ron believed the Ark of the Covenant was. And so from the 2003 to 2006 years, I was in charge of the, you can call it the media team. We had a crew of people with cameras and video cameras and, documenting the work. And then Richard would make the videos after that. And so I was in Jerusalem for about a month every summer. And so my job allowed me to do that. So it was just very exciting. And then right before the pandemic, between 2013 and 2019, I was going back and forth a lot, especially to Saudi Arabia. We had a business visa invitation letter from a Saudi prince. So this was before the tourist visas, 2019. So for 3 years, we were going in and out on a business visa, sneaking around Saudi Arabia, documenting the Exodus sites, and then also coming to Turkey again. After 2000, I kind of stopped coming to Turkey, but then 2013, I came back and really got interested in researching this boat formation out. That I got so involved in it that I would stay out here for 2 to 3 months, and now I live here. So January or
Wow.
February of 2020, I moved out here to Turkey, and that's now my base. It's close to all the action, and I do tours out here too. But that's kind of my interest in all this. But as a kid, when you're around religion, sometimes it can become difficult to make it your own, in the sense that, like, if your parents, you're doing this because your parents take you to church, or they make you go to, like, a worship service, or they tell you to say your prayers. And so there's been times in life where, when you were on your own, you have to make your own decisions. Let's say in college, right? It's just like, I knew what was true. I knew, like, that the Bible's true. I never doubted there was, like there wasn't a God. I knew there had to be a God, and that all the evidence points to it. But you get lazy in your belief, and, like, there'd be times when you just wouldn't go to church, or just wouldn't read the Bible, and you're off doing your own thing in your own world. But then God would bring you back, and like, these discoveries have really, not just the sharing it with other people, especially non-believers or non-Christians, like I can with Noah's Ark out here. Just when people who show up at the site, the visitor center, we can share with them. But that also helps yourself, and seeing what God does with this information. Um, and so for my walk of faith with God, it started young, and I was baptized. I was in my preteen years. I think I was 12 or something at the time I got baptized. I really believed this was true, and I wanted to be baptized. But again, the times where you, not backslide, but you're basically not involved in what you believe in. And I'm just thankful that what I'm doing today, you're kind of in the trenches, in a part of the world where Christianity is not the number one religion, but you're able to share in a certain way these truths from the Bible, and that just strengthens your faith. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today, and a little bit who I am. And later, we do have websites and a YouTube channel where we push this information out, because obviously you can reach more people online about this versus having people come on a tour. You get like 5, 10 people to come out here, but you can have 100,000 people watch a video on YouTube. So God has made all this possible, and I'm just happy that you're having me here, and I can share more about the latest of what's going on, and more about what we're doing.
Yeah, that's great, man. So Ron Wyatt must have been a really humble guy. Like, if I got a random call from some 14-year-old from living from some random city, like, no, man, go talk to your parents, man. So
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
yeah, he must
No,
have
he
really had
was
a heart for them.
so. Yeah, I remember when we had him out here. I was just talking to one of the people on the tour. They asked me some very, very similar question today, after I picked him up at the airport, and they're like, "What was Ron Wyatt like?"
Yeah,
And I told this lady, I said, "Well, I remember we had him the first time he came to Sacramento. We had a potluck, a little dinner at my house, my parents' house, And so we had brought all our friends and those who wanted to come. So it was like maybe 20 people there. So, when you're at a get together like that, you have just all sorts of topics come up. And, people talk about basketball or politics, or, whatever. But
How old are you
noticed that
now, by the way?
Ron, I'm born in 76, so whatever that
Oh,
is,
all right,
47.
all right.
And so I remember Ron would not get engaged. Someone would say, "Ah, do you see the latest NBA game or whatever?" It would like go over his head, or he wouldn't like say much about it. He just was not engaged in that topic. But as soon as you mentioned something about Noah's Ark or just the Bible in general, his eyes would light up, and he would have something to say about it. Like his only, and this was just my observation as a, at that time, middle schooler in, no, it was 95, 96. So this was right after I graduated from high school when we brought him out. And so, late teen years, here's this guy who claimed, he's not a showman, but he, he said he found Noah's Ark in Mount Sinai, Ark of the Covenant, and yet he's not there like telling everyone all the greatest adventure stories and making him the center of attention. He's making the Bible and God the center, and it was all about saving souls, and it wasn't about anyone else, and it definitely was not about himself.
Yeah, because when you
Uh,
really think about it, he was the real Indiana Jones. If you really
yeah,
think
for
about it,
sure.
he
He
found the
he tells
lost
this.
ark, all these religious
In one of his
artifacts and stuff.
meetings, if you watch some of his old videos on the internet, someone, I don't know what, there's different YouTube channels that have them, like the Q&A sessions, or one of the TV interviews maybe. He mentions that they were in Israel digging when the Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Indiana Jones movie came out, and they went to see it, him and his two sons, in a theater in Israel. This was like 1981. And they were like, he said, they were kind of like, hey, here we are, like watching this movie from Hollywood about looking for the Ark of the Covenant. At the same time, they're looking for the real Ark. They just couldn't believe it. The devil has his ways of getting people confused on a topic. This movie was saying it was in Egypt, and the Nazis, it was obviously all made up, but still, there was this interest though. People at the time, they were looking for the Ark. This movie actually served a purpose, and it got people interested in the topic. Where probably most of those people who saw the movie never even heard of the Ark of the Covenant, or all that. So, God can turn the situation around and use it. But it was just interesting that they were there in Israel, and that's when they saw the movie.
So what they do? They went and bought Ron a whip or something.
Yeah, they had. Well,
Yeah,
later on
the
in
hat
life,
and the whip.
you do see him on some of the interviews, or just in his meetings. Will have a vest on. I don't know if
Yeah,
he ever had a hat. Definitely not a whip, but
yeah,
it's just you put on the part of an explorer. You have the photography vest with all the pockets.
yeah. So that first time you called him, and he had just came from the Middle East. Well, what was he coming in from?
Later I found out because I signed up for his newsletter, which he didn't publish many issues. But I was just trying to get all this information, absorb it, and so it's not like they had a website and hundreds of YouTube videos. There was no YouTube back then, so I remember every VHS tape that they would put out. I'm trying to buy it if I had the money for it, and then I signed up like $25 a year. You get like a quarterly newsletter, but it was never on time. They were like just a one man show basically, almost like just him and his wife. And so we, me, when I would get this information, it always generate new questions. And I always have to call him back there. Well, you said this in this video, or you said this in this newsletter. Um, and so later I found out he had come on that trip. I think he had gone to Hebron on that trip. And he was looking for the real cave of Machpelah, where Abraham was buried, and he believed it was not the traditional site that you see on tours, the big
So the one
Herodian
where
site.
basically he believes that for the listeners that don't know, there's a huge church. No, not a church. It's a mosque on one side and it's a synagogue
Yeah,
on the other side, and it's all conveyed right under this site where they
it's a
believe
huge, like it looks like a
Abraham's.
fortress. They
Yeah.
say King Herod built something over it, and this is the traditional cave of Machpelah where the patriarchs were buried. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their wives. But Ron believed it was nearby, but not there. And one of the Arab families that had lived in that area, they had some like supernatural happenings going on in the property, and they started digging around. They found a cave. And anyway, they brought in Ron to check it out, and I believe later that's why when I found out about that, but he just come back from that trip. So this was, I might be off on a couple years, but I thought that was it. But this was 91 that I called him, 90, 91. I remember I was in middle school. It was either seventh or eighth grade, and I would share like every time I would talk to Ron and get something new, I'd always share it with my history teacher. I don't know if he thought I was crazy, but he was always willing to talk about it. And so we always like during my lunch break or the lunchtime and recess, whatever you call it,
Man, this
I'd
kid
go
really
meet
comes
with
up with
him.
some whoppers, huh?
Well, we talk about it and like go the pros and cons and figure things out. So I was never to get the one thing straight is that I was never I don't know I was never like a Ron White like cult like follower or whatever you want to call it or a groupie. To me, it was like fascinating. It would prove the Bible right, so I wanted to know if it was true. And for my own like Sherlock Holmes way as a kid, and just being interested in this type of stuff, I would go investigate it. Again, like talk to people who worked with them, dig go to the library. Back then the library was a big thing for me, so I'd go to the library and bring in books, look at articles about these topics, and that continued all the way until I could afford to go overseas a lot or now live here. But that interest just kind of grew, and for me it was always about okay, well, this evidence proved like what he found is true in Saudi Arabia. Like Midian is there. You'll find now even scholars are publishing that Midian is in northwest Saudi Arabia, and you'll see the evidence around the mountain. I've
Because they
climbed
don't
that
want,
mountain.
because at the end of the day, they don't want it to be there. There's so much secularism
Yeah.
mixed in now. They don't want it to be true, so they will lead you in a false direction. And because I remember
Oh yeah, just to throw you off. Yeah.
yeah, I remember when I seen Ron's video for the first time. It's the Ron Wyatt discoveries where it goes through all of them.
Yeah.
My mind was
Yeah.
blown. I'm like, oh my god, how can anybody
Yes.
deny it now? How can you deny it? You know,
Oh, they'll do their best.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Here you got Noah's
Yeah.
Ark to the exact specifications it is. You know,
Yeah. It's interesting because Noah's Ark on that topic, you'll have a lot of critics who jump right into it's a geological formation. In fact, there's like I know there's at least one. There's two scientifically like scholarly published peer-reviewed articles. Making fun of not making fun of the site, but basically saying it's geological. One was back in the mid '90s that was written, I think in '97 by Professor Collins, a geologist from Southern California. He claims he's not an atheist, but he does his best to disprove the site. But then there's a Turkish geologist. I don't know if he's a professor or what, but he published an article. I think it was 2010. Anyways, it's interesting. This guy's article, and I have even the original paper before he published it. He's claiming that this is a solid rock that came down the mountain from higher up, and then it's where it's at now. And then over time, meaning over millions of years, glaciers. There's no evidence of a glacier in that area at all. This is not even a glacier area. But he says glaciers formed the arc, and weathering and the glacier, and then the mud going around it formed the boat shape, streamlined shape. It's just like where did this guy come up with this stuff? And it was peer reviewed, and so obviously they want to confuse people because when you talk to someone about it, they'll say, "Well, what did the scientists say?" And look, this was published that this is a solid rock. If you come out into Turkey, I'll let you come walk on the boat, and it's not a solid rock. There's a rock in the middle, but the whole boat is not a solid rock. So what's keeping this shape together? It was first documented in 1959. It was discovered on 9/11, September 11,
wow.
1959, by a Turkish cartographer, Captain Durupinar. And the first photographs were published a month later in October in Wyatt, which is Turkish, meaning for Life magazine, their version of Life magazine. And it went around the world. This photograph, this black and white, high altitude aerial photo of this boat formation. And it caused headlines, and people wanted to come investigate it. In fact, the team came a year later to investigate it, but that shape has stayed the same. It's still 300 Royal Egyptian cubits, 515 feet long. It's still 138 feet in the middle. It's still the same streamlined shape, but all around it, you look at the old photographs, compare it to the new, especially our drone photos and videos that's all over the internet now. The new
Now they got
photos
the
from
underground penetrating
yeah,
radar, and
yeah, we did that on 2 trips. We did those. But if you
so
look at
you help the research
if
teams
you
as well. You help the
yeah, we
research team with their
organized.
data.
Well, I want to finish one thing here. That when you look at these old photos and you compare it to our new photos, we started taking drone photos of the site in 2018,
Mhm.
and you'll notice that everything around the boat changes, like the terrain, the mud flow, this earth flow they technically call it. It's always changing. There's a new, crevice open up. Something moved for over the spring, winter months when the rain comes down, but the boat is always the same. And so something is holding this thing together. And even the scientists we work with, Dr. Salih Barak Tutan, who's a geologist, he's a Muslim, but he believes this is a man-made formation and probably the Noah's Ark. And he says there's something chemically different about this soil that he wants to have tested because it's harder material and it's kept its dimension. Yeah, sure, there's erosion going on now, but it's still the same dimensions and the same shape of a boat since the 59 photo until now. But all the way around it, all the natural terrain has changed in that mud flow. And so what's holding it together? It's not a solid rock. It's dirt, but the radar, like you talked about this radar we did in 2019, and then in 2021, we had the Turkish government scan it with ERT. And then John Larson of New Zealand did the 2014 scans, which I was there filming that back in 2014. And, all of these different technologies that let you look underground, peer into the soil, and these geophysical techniques, it's a non-destructive way to look into the ground without digging a hole. They all show that there's something down there that's not natural, that's unique to that boat formation. You're seeing angular structure, you're seeing parallel lines, you're seeing layers in below the ground there. And this one scientist who got his article published is claiming, no, it's a solid block of rock that somehow over time became a shape of a boat. And it's not that. The limited core drilling done, the radar, the ERT scans, all that shows that it is a special type of dirt that's being held together, probably because this boat that was covered in pitch, and sealed, that has decayed over these thousands of years, has affected the soil around it. Just like a wooden ship would, like a Roman ship, Greek, the Viking burial ships. You find these wooden vessels that have decayed in Europe and in the Mediterranean area. And once they decay, they leave the shape, or they leave the imprint, or the chemical nature changes, or the terrain above the ground changes, and that's how they find these boats.
Well,
And
the wood
exactly what
is
you
the wood is not petrified, right? Like the wood is
yeah,
still there, but
that's
it's solid rock.
it's both. So like above ground, like on the surface, it's dirt. And so when you like were to dig the first 5 feet, you're not going to find, like, it's fragmented and been destroyed by the elements. But the radar scans and ERT scans, these survey techniques, they're showing solid, thick layers and right angles that look like walls and rooms and the corridors down like 3 meters, about 9 feet, all the way down to 7 meters, close to 20 feet or so. So
Now
there's things deeper in the ground that looks preserved.
I seen a clip of I'm not sure how real it was, but it was I think a group from like Japan or something that actually
Hong
went in
Kong.
the structure and that
Well,
they
okay. Yeah. So there's two things on that. One, there's some people who've using artificial intelligence, AI, to make videos, to make money. They make these short viral videos, and they combine two different sites. They show the Drupanar, photographs from the air. A lot of times, my aerial drone photos, and then they combine it with this Chinese group, NAMI, it's called.
yeah
That in 2009 and 10, they went up on the big mountain about 17 miles north of this location, the
Arab
big Mount
proper, right?
Ararat.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
because
a volcano.
I learned
Eh,
about this not so long ago that there's a second site where they think there's a boat up there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So there's all these mysterious sightings, but never like a site that we can bring a team up to look at. So that original site was in the news back in 2009 and 10, and now it's 2024, and the guy who was charging literally thousands of dollars. In fact, I interviewed, or I had a little discussion with one of the guys who went there in 2014. He Skyped me. He said, "Hey, Andrew, I want to share with you what I just did. I didn't know this guy, but he saw my interest in the Drupanar site, which is south of the mountain, different site." And he
Yeah,
said, "Hey, I went on the mountain. This local guide, I won't tell the name, but everyone knows him. He took these different teams up. The Chinese team. He took this guy who's an American guy up in 2014. And so when he called me, he had photographs of his trip. So I asked him, well, how, like, why doesn't this guy, is like a secret? Why doesn't he show us the exact location? And then all these archaeologists can prove it's Noah's Ark." And I said, "How much did he charge you?" And he said the guy was charged $24,000. It's a money. I hate to say it, it's a
yeah.
money making thing for this one local guy and his friends. And so people ask, well, then what's up there? And that we don't know until they can show that it is the boat. What the rumors are saying, and again, I didn't see this happen, but what people, the locals will tell you, other climbers will tell you, is that this guy hired villagers a couple of years before he showed the Chinese team, and they brought up these different wood from different parts of Turkey and put it into the side of the mountain during the hot season, so like summertime. And then each winter, 1 or 2 winters in a row, it kind of froze everything in place. So we had these little wooden rooms there of wood they had planted. And then they charged, the last we heard was like over $1 million, this Chinese business team. And they made a bunch of money. And that was, 14 years ago, 2009, 2010. And nothing has become of that. Yet they still, once in a while, talk about it. You'll see a lot of YouTube videos about it. And then some people will take those YouTube videos of people climbing in this little crevice and they're seeing this wood wall and the ice, and they'll combine it with the Ron Wyatt site, the Drupanar boat site, and then it confuses people. And then they say, "Oh, we heard like you just mentioned, like a team that went into the boat." No one, the Drupanar site is on the side of a mountain at 6,400 feet. There's no glacier, no ice there. It gets snow in the winter, but there's no one dug a hole into it. So someone is confusing the people, sadly, and combining both sites.
Yeah, and even if the Rupinar site, even if it had some kind of ancient Paleo Hebrew saying this is the Ark of Noah, someone would say no, it's not, because they're getting funding to go look for it. So as long as they're getting, they don't want it found.
Well, exactly. It's an annual activity. It's their annual fundraising newsletter. So if they find it, the show's over and they need to find something else to fundraise for. Sad, but you think of all the amount of resources and time, and even people lost their lives looking for the Ark from the big mountain. This post-flood volcano. It's a stratovolcano, which means or a composite. It's the same name for the same type of volcano. And this type of volcano, every eruption builds the mountain. So that's why it has layers or composite, stratigraphy, stratovolcano. And so that's what everyone, even creationists, evolutionists, they all say Mount Ararat is a stratovolcano. And what's interesting is the layer below it, this plain that's built on, that plain is flood deposits. It's sedimentary layers below Mount Ararat. So what does that tell you? And this is on Ark, the people who run Ark Encounters, Answers in Genesis. Now, just to be clear, they don't think the Drupanar site is Noah's Ark, but they have some really good geology about why Mount Ararat can't be where Noah's Ark landed, because the mountain probably didn't exist during the flood. It was after the flood happened and the water dried up. This mountain was formed through all the different volcanic activity in this region. There's a number of volcanoes here, big ones too. They're mainly dormant, but they're just as big as Ararat almost. And in this region, there's a lot of seismic activity.
It says the Ark landed in the mountains of Ararat. It's a mountain
region.
It's not just one mountain.
And so you can see why people picked one mountain, because you think logically, as the flood's going down in the area, the Ark, and then it said that it got grounded, and then it said after that in Genesis chapter 8, the next thing happens, you see the mountain peaks. So in their view, that means the Ark landed on the very top of a mountain, and the highest mountain in the area today is Mount Ararat. So logically, they're thinking, well, that has to be where the Ark landed, and then the 400 or 500 years ago during the Middle Ages, this got the name Mount Ararat by some bishops, and okay, this is it. This is the mountain. So again, they're trying to use their logic, but what they didn't realize, like using geology, even if you're a creationist, this creation geologist, that this mountain is built on layers that were laid down by the flood. That means this mountain was not existing during the flood. So you had all these fossil deposits and sedimentary layers, and then you have this mountain formed, a stratovolcano, and it has all this lava and basalt rock on the outside, like the last eruption that formed it. What you see today, if you climb up the mountain, you're walking on basalt rock. And what that shows you, and this is all material that was produced after the flood. This lava that came out of the mountain that erupted didn't form underwater. Like you go to Hawaii and you see the big volcano there in Hawaii, and as the lava hits that ocean, it bubbles up and forms these look like a pillow. They call it pillow lava because this lava forms underwater. There's no pillow lava on Mount Ararat anywhere. And so you have just the geological evidence showing that this mountain didn't exist. And so this was not a place that Noah could have landed. It was formed much, we don't know how many years later, but it was after the flood, the mountain was formed. It had lots of different eruptions. The last was 1840, I believe, when 1,000 people were killed on the north side. It was like Mount St. Helens in Washington. The north side blew out, and it formed the Ahora Gorge. And so that was the last known eruption. It was also a seismic activity, a big earthquake. So yeah, to me, it's amazing that people are still up there looking for it. Every year now, it's a big sporting mountain. Turkey has opened it up so that as a trekker, mountain climber, you can climb Mount Ararat. It's not a technical climb; it's a 3-day climb usually.
So you can you
people,
get to what
you
about
can get to
where
the
the
very top.
Rubenard site is?
That one's simple. You take a taxi, and there's a road that goes right at 6,500 foot elevation, where the Droplanar site is, and you just take a taxi from Doe by Zet, where I live, and you can go there on your own. Google Earth and Google Maps will show you. You don't have to pay $24,000 to see a secret site. It's there in the open.
Yeah.
You can pay maybe $100 for a taxi for the whole day, and so across the valley, that's where the big adventure is. If you want to climb the mountain. But here's the thing: the glaciers up there, especially in August, it has melted since the 1970s until now. With using satellite imagery, we can compare each year the glacier, and it has actually receded. You can call it whatever you want. People say it's global warming, whatever the technical thing is going on there. This glacier is getting smaller and smaller, which means that it's exposing more of the mountain up there. And so people in the past have claimed, oh, the Ark is hiding somewhere in that glacier. Or only a couple of people, the last 100 years, think of how many people have climbed the mountain. Before the last 20 years, you had only a very small number of people who have gone up to the summit. So it's a very mysterious mountain. In like 100 years ago, it's very hard to get to this part of Turkey. It's like the Wild West. And so you had a very small, limited people who had gone up. So if you make a claim saying, hey, I saw Noah's Ark and it's like 1850, whatever, you're going to tell your church that. You go in the newspaper, people say, hey, this man said he saw Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. There's no way to prove you wrong. But now you have Google Earth. There's a lot of commercial satellites available with like centimeter resolution. And that whole mountain's been photographed. And walking all over this mountain of these tourists now, every year you're getting literally hundreds, if not thousands of tourists, especially from Europe, coming just to climb the tallest mountain in Turkey. So it's like going up Mount Everest. It's something like a challenge to do. And no one has spotted Noah's Ark up there. I'm sorry. There's no Ark on that mountain. Just these eyewitness accounts
and this
50
is from
years
someone
ago.
who lives there. This is someone who lives there and goes out there and explores. So
no, I should climb it so I can just save myself. It's a huge mountain. It's over 16,000 feet, and there's a lot of territory to cover. But you're talking about a 500 plus foot long boat, so it can't be hiding somewhere now. So yeah, I'm saying.
Like one of the things that I mean, also when they did the ground penetrating radar and stuff like that, or and with metal detectors, they were able to find rivets at intervals. Like someone was nailing stuff on there.
Yeah, Ron. It's really interesting. So when they first found the site in '59, they brought a team out. It was a Christian team that came out there in 1960. So about a year later, June of '60, American Turkish team got together and they went out there to see what the site was. That was photographed from a high altitude, and they did an on-the-ground investigation. And they saw the same dirt, except at that time you could see the boat formation, but the soil around the formation, like on the outside edges, was all the way to the top. Nowadays, it's all dropped away. You got like 20 to 30 foot sidewalls exposed. But these people, they didn't see anything that they could recognize as a ship. They in their mind were thinking, oh, it's a perfectly preserved barge or boat. And now they're looking at this dirt-shaped ship formation, and they're like, okay, we don't see anything. Let's dynamite it. So they actually dynamited it in 2 spots. They're not very archaeological tools, not scientific. But they blew a hole in it, and they still didn't realize that most of the stuff is below the ground, deeper, and just the decaying shape is what you see above. So they left it, and people kind of forgot about it. A couple of books wrote about the site. It became part of the folklore of the search for Noah's Ark until Ron Wyatt got involved. And it was because of his involvement. He thought, well, let's test the soil. And so there was a 1978, I believe, earthquake, and he came back in 79. But
Yeah.
that earthquake opened a crack down the middle.
Yeah,
So
that
he's able
crack
to
did
get
more
soil.
than any other dynamite could have done.
Yeah, exactly. And he got soil samples deep in the crack, like that was not disturbed by modern, whatever. And then he compared it to soil samples from the surrounding areas outside the boat, like as a control for scientific method. And he took that to a lab, and it said, "Hey, there is higher or carbon content, organic carbon in the middle and deep inside this formation, suggesting that it's a decaying wooden vessel." So then, he was doing like he got a chemical analysis done, and so that was, 79, early 80s. He gets the next idea, reading the Bible. It talks about tubal-cain and that they had alloys before the flood. They're making iron and bronze. And so he believed that, well, Noah would have had the same technology. He thought, the Bible talks about the wood, gopher wood, but it doesn't give us all the little details of how Noah built the ark. It talks about 3 layers, 3 decks, the one door, the one window on the top, the length, the width, and the depth or the height of the boat. But it says nothing about the sewer system or where Noah slept. So Ron believed that metal was used, and so he wanted to test that. And so he just got the simple idea of, hey, let's bring metal detectors out here. And so I believe it was 83 or 84, they did a metal detector survey, and they got people really interested, especially David Fazold. And then finally they did a complete survey. I forget what year they did the complete survey, but it might have been 84, 85. And they laid out the ribbons and like connecting the dots. And so every few meters or every few feet, they were getting a reading with the regular metal detector. It was the top end models from American manufacturer, and it was showing that there was a metal pattern inside the boat formation. And Ron, just to show that everything is, he's doing the right scientific method, he even tried that same experiment outside the boat formation, and it was just random noise. There was no regular pattern of metal. So again, it's suggestive that there's something not natural within the walls of that boat formation. And then because he got that metal reading, the next thing they heard about was radar. It was really early forms of ground penetrating radar, and it uses this magnetic signal that they're like, it's almost like sonar and underwater, where there's frequencies being shot into the soil thousands of times a second. And then, back then it was analog, so it'd read it out on the central processing unit and print it out on a piece of thermal paper. So you get these rolls and rolls of paper. Now it's all digital. But they decided, let's peer into the ground using this method, this brand new, pretty new method. In fact, I think Noah's Ark was the first place in Turkey they used it, according to one of the scientists I talked to. But they did that, and again, that showed this whole pattern, the same pattern that the metal detectors are picking up, and it's just showing this in a more graphic visual way that there's something below the soil that means it's man-made. Because naturally, you wouldn't get those same reflections, the same walls, the same pattern that he saw. And even we're seeing the same type of things on our 2019 GPR scans, which were digital, use the latest technology. We hired a random team that had nothing to do with Noah's Ark. In fact, one of the guys was an atheist, but they were hired to do a job. They came out from America, and they did it. And according to our most recent analysis by a geophysicist who has 40 years experience in this field, she said, "Hey, you have a central." She calls it tunnel, but it's a corridor going down the boat, like a central hallway, and then you're going to a central atrium, this central room that goes through all the levels, like a big cave that's in the middle of the boat. It's almost just like you see on the Ark Encounters boat in Kentucky, and so
Have you been
not
there?
only are you. Yes, I actually went there once in 2018. It's really impressive. This, the wooden structure that they made is almost the same size. It's 500 feet long, but it has some of the same things we're seeing now with the GPR. Brand new analysis from last year of our 2019 data. We had someone independently rerun the data, so you get a second opinion, and they spotted this. I can send you the graphics you can put up on your when you edit the podcast, but it shows the central hallway. And then what's really interesting, which we haven't published yet, and maybe it's in some of my short videos on my YouTube, but we didn't really bring it out yet. But some of the scans that she was showing us a little deeper below that central hallway, which looks to be the second deck level, we're seeing the faint remains of squares, like the rooms, right below that. And so again, these are things where you have to ground truth, meaning you need to do an excavation or core drill down to see what they are. But it's very suggestive, like this can't be natural, and it's the size of Noah's Ark. So for those who just want to totally ignore it and chase like the latest rumor and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to see a fake site on the mountain, I think it's so illogical when they could use all that resources and time to check out the Drupinar site that's visible, and you just take a car ride to it. You don't have to pay anybody thousands of dollars.
Now, I know one of the big things that was on Ron's mind when he was out there is that the whole place was, not friendly at the time. That's changed a lot because I'm pretty
Yes.
sure because of the
Yeah,
tourism
back.
coming in, right?
Oh
Because
yeah,
back then he
back
said
then.
he thought they were going to kidnap
Yeah.
him, and he ends up.
Yeah, no, his life was threatened. He got robbed out there. He stopped bringing his first trip. He brought his two teenage sons. After that, he never did. Later on when they were adults in the '90s, they came out. One or two of them, or both of them, I forget. But it wasn't. But he was going back and forth a lot. But he wouldn't bring his sons out there anymore because it was dangerous. Definitely what's changed is that just like other areas that are remote in the world where they have more and more outside contact and people exchanging ideas. They see other cultures and whatever. Uh, they're less, they're more friendly, and they realize they can make money on tourists, so they want to chase off your money machines. So they have more hotels now. Everything, Dubai Zet. It's a border town, so you're still on the border dealing with people doing their whatever they want to do, smuggle in stuff from Iran. But you're also seeing a lot more tourists come in because they want to climb Mount Ararat, just to climb it, not to look for Noah's Ark. Or you see people wanting to go check out other parts of Turkey because it's cheaper to fly versus
They
30 years
smuggled
ago or
stuff out
whatever.
of Iran.
Yeah, it's a border area. So a lot of people, and I've met people who've said they used to smuggle cigarettes. That was a big thing.
Oh, why they don't
Maybe
sell cigarettes in Turkey?
Well, they're a lot cheaper than Iranian cigarettes. Yeah,
Oh,
they're
okay.
a lot
I was
cheaper.
like, I thought Turkish
Yeah.
tobacco was one of the best tobaccos on earth.
10-year-olds out here smoke. Like everyone smokes
Oh
in
God.
Turkey.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's a big thing in the Middle East too. But so you have this border mentality, and they're always leery of outsiders. That's all changed. When I was there in '97, like my first trip, we were so scared, and not because we were not threatened. Well, I take that back. The village where Ron found the drogue stones, the stones with the holes.
Yeah. A
That
bunch of
village
anchor
always
stones
has.
for you guys that don't know. First he found a bunch of anchor stones that are like 6 feet tall, tons with a hole drilled inside the top of the or on the top of the stone where they could put in a rope. So these are big
Mhm.
anchor stones, and they got lots of writing and stuff on them. I'll let you tell them.
Well, yeah. So the technical term, Ron was calling them anchor stones, and later they were to call them um, drogue stones, which they're similar, but anchor stones stops the ship and anchors it. A drogue stone are used as weights in a storm. You would throw them overboard to hang on the sides or tied to the side of your boat. And so when the storm waves are rocking the ship, the more weight you had holding it down, the less rocking back and forth. And so that's what Ron theorized that these stones were for. And so far they found 26, and they're mostly found in this village. The Kurdish name is Arzap. On Google Earth or Google Maps, it's called Saglak Suyu, which is the Turkish name for the village, and they're all in that area. Well,
Is
even
that
in
is that the Valley
'97,
of Eight?
yeah, that was a name.
The
So when
Valley of
he
Eight.
went there in
So I
1977,
that's
yeah,
the ancient name of the place is the Valley of Eight.
yeah,
How
and
much
which is interesting.
more it is?
Because
Yeah,
the people who live there, they don't know what a lot of these ancient names mean because they didn't live there all these generations, like 1,000 years. They did not live there. The people who live there today, they were brought in maybe 100 years ago or so. So they're kind of new. They don't have all the old traditions, but the names were still used, like reused or kept the same. Um, so this village that caused Ron a lot of problems. The mayor didn't like him, and he was chased out a couple times. And then that's the place where they say that a grave with the giants were robbed. and the treasure taken out of the grave in 84, 85.
Well, I guess he had found that was his wife's
He thought it was
burial,
his
right?
wife's. What happened, and I've seen the old video. It's up on our channel, and even the old videos by Ron Wyatt. In '85, he finds this site with his sons in 1977, and they're exploring this village. They see the anchor stones, and then they go further up the side of this hill on the outskirts of the village, and they find this ruined house or building, and right in front of it there are two huge stones, but they're not anchor stones. There's no holes in them. And one's standing up, and right beside it is another one laying over, like it fell over in antiquities or someone pushed it over. But on it were these faint carvings, and what he saw was 8 figures, like small to big, and the two largest was a man and a wife, a man and a woman, and then above them was this giant wave, like an ocean wave. And on the crest of the wave was this boat formation, like a hull of a ship, and above it was drawn like a half rainbow, like a rainbow, whatever, the arch of a rainbow. And so Ron believed that these were actual gravestones marking the place where Noah and his wife were buried.
Have you seen
And he
them?
put the he well, so that what so this is what happened. He put it. He self published a book. He made photocopies or something back in '80 or '81, and he put all this information in there. He was passing them out to all these Ark hunters, people looking for Noah's Ark up on Mount Ararat in those early '80s. One of those guys happened to be a thief and a scoundrel. He wouldn't name the guy, but he knew that it had to been this guy because he disappeared off the scene and never came back to Turkey. But according to one of the villagers, so this is what happened. Ron was giving out these books. 1985, he's there again. He wants to show David Fazel the same site. This is Fazel's first trip, March of '85. And this is a new guy coming on the scene. He wants to help Ron out. He believes the Ark is not on Ararat. So Ron said, hey, it's here at the Drupanar site across the valley. So Fazel's super excited. So Ron takes him out to this little village. And when they get there, instead of those stones, like that he saw, the big stones, they're gone. Like they're broken up and all the pieces are gone. And we're right in front of those stones is that 18-foot long trench, this giant trench dug. And you'll see David Fazel standing in this depression. And he's like, what's going on here? And even when I first came there in 77, not 77, 97, 20 years later, when my first visit, that depression was still there. Now it's not because the Turks have excavated the site 2 years ago, and they did all these pit excavations across. And when they finished with their season, they leveled it all out to make it level ground. So you can't see that depression anymore. But anyways, so then Ron realized this was '85 that someone robbed the grave, and they dug up one of the two graves. So he reported it to authorities. So then when the Turkish authorities got involved, they finally found the one villager who helped. He said it was an American explorer dig up this one grave. And to get the guy to talk, according to what the police said, they pulled out the guy's fingernails or toenails, and the guy started talking. You think how painful that would be? And he said what he saw. He said basically he was paid like $300 or $400, very small amount of money, to help this man dig up the grave. And when they got down, I don't know how many feet, they came across this 18 or I think it was 18 feet, maybe it was 15 or 16, but it was, it was huge. The stone box, the sarcophagus made of stone. He said when they opened it up, inside was a giant burial. It was a giant, 18 feet long. The bones were there. But what was more interesting to these guys was the treasure. It was full of jewelry and gold and silver, and that's what the guy took. And then they broke up and they hid the evidence. I mean, they destroyed the evidence. So the grave markers are no longer there. I never saw it. '85, they were missing the Ron's video already.
They destroyed the skeleton.
The skeleton.
Man.
They just took the treasure. Supposedly, there's one more grave there that hasn't been touched, or maybe in antiquities it was robbed. But there's supposed to be one more grave in the area. It would have been Noah's, if that is Noah and his wife's grave. So then Ron became very leery after that of sharing any information.
They know where it's at.
People.
They know where that.
Well, it's somewhere in that general area. If you think of where the headstones are, they're right beside each other. So somewhere in that area has to be the other grave, whether it's the same depth or dug deeper down in the ground, or if it's gone in antiquities, maybe someone robbed it. You just don't know. Now the Turks, they excavated to a certain level. They didn't find any other giant grave there. They found two more modern graves, maybe a couple 100-year-old graves, but they're normal sized people, like a woman and a child, but they're normal size. And they found that on their excavation, but it wasn't deep in the ground. So possibly they haven't found Noah's grave, they missed it, or it wasn't there at that exact
What did
spot.
the Smithsonian get involved at all?
Yeah, I know. That's what everyone always wants to know.
Because anytime there's
No,
something giant,
well,
the Smithsonian gets
I know,
involved.
it
And
disappears.
they pay,
Well,
yeah.
this. What's interesting? Like you have all these old stories from the 1800s of articles. And even photographs. Now, where's all this stuff? Like today, you don't see anything, and where's all this stuff from 200 years ago? Some, yeah, the authorities involved in this science, they don't want this published. And well, so now sadly on this part, it wasn't the Smithsonians who robbed it, unless they paid this guy, but it was this treasure hunting ark hunter who got involved and for personal gain. For example, they say that on the black market about the same time, this huge piece of jewelry that covered her chest was sold. It was one solid piece of gold studded with different gemstones. Might have been, Ron said it had been quite a piece because it was sold for about 100 million, 75 to $100 million at that time on the Istanbul black market. So some rich guy got it for his personal collection, maybe broke it down and melted the gold. Who
How
knows?
did he find out about it?
Well, I don't know how these things work, but word gets out when something special shows up on the market, I guess. And some rich person back then got a hold of it. But, some of the money that was used, though, to stop the investigation. So at a certain level at the time, the investigation didn't went any further. So that American man who robbed those graves, he never got in trouble. Not until later, Judgment Day. But for now, he's, he's free
Man,
to. I don't know.
he desecrated the body of Noah's wife.
That's horrible. Yeah, to think about, like for personal gain, and
Yeah.
then you lost the evidence of the giant, the giant
Yeah.
bones there. We'll think of the scientific evidence, the DNA they could study, the ancient DNA. It just, yeah, for me, as someone who's interested in archaeology more than finding a treasure, which would be cool to see too, but still, like all this information, this was someone who lived before the flood, and who knows what. I always, I'm going to speculate here, and I hate doing that. But I always, like, when I'm bored, I'll dream about, okay, what if you find Noah's grave? What would be in it? Like, his wife had all this jewelry and everything. Maybe he has a scale model of Noah's Ark, or, or something like written down document, or a plaque his sons put in there saying, "Builder of Noah's Ark." Something to associate him. Yeah, this speculation.
Maybe we'll find the language from before the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. Exactly. There's something like written in a book or a plaque that's hieroglyphs or some picture language that was that they put in there. But it's fascinating, and I love being out there now. Like this, right almost on site where I live. You're 30 minutes, and when we do our tours, we're like the hotels are 30 minutes away. They're in Dolbayzet, and so we just like tomorrow we'll fly over to Eastern Turkey. Wednesday we start the tour, and we spend all day in that area. There's a canyon just on the other side of the hill where Noah's Ark is, and it's full of fossils. They call it the Tetra Sea, this ocean, this inland sea that existed in this area of Turkey before the flood. And so you find fossilized seashells, shallow, like near shore seashells, sand dollars, thousands of them, all embedded in the sedimentary rock there, a whole layer. And so we go there and we show them that, and then we.
And for you guys that don't know, those things don't know how to climb. Those things don't know how to climb. So
and there's
no flood.
And by the way, and there's no nearby sea right now. Like the nearest sea is the Black Sea or the Caspian Sea, or it's like hundreds of miles away. So there's no sea like where this. But in fact, someone told me once they thought that this was a lake where the ark was, and this was someone's personal vessel. And just crazy things people come up with to not believe the truth. Another guy told me, and I get these comments on my YouTube channel. They say, "Oh, this is not Noah's Ark. This is the Nephilim Ark. Like there's a second boat during the flood for the Nephilim." And just like, where do you come up with this stuff? There was no second boat. The Bible says only 8 people survived. There was no other boat with other giants or creatures on. No, this is Noah's Ark. It exactly fits what the Bible says. It's in the mountains of Ararat.
Now, you since you give tours both there and in Mount Sinai, as a Christian,
Sinai. Oh, I love that.
As a Christian, what's it like dealing with the Muslims?
We've had wonderful relations with them. It's just no issues. And I was kind of briefly mentioning that one village on my first trip here, and how that the Anchorstone village or Valley of Eight, how they caused Ron problems there, and that's more to do not with um, uh, like their nationality or even religion. They're just bad people in that village at the time. Now it's more open and free. You can go to the village, and we usually hire the retired mayor of the village to guide us around, because some people, like, if you're in America, you had strangers walking through your backyard taking pictures or taking samples, or taking little rocks for souvenirs, you might get mad and want to shoot them. And so you have this village, and then these foreigners start showing up and walking through your backyard and taking pictures of everything. And so Ron had problems. And so when I was there in 1997, we had to run out that village. We drove out the other side because they started yelling something in Kurdish. And so I asked my guide at the time. I said, "What are they saying?" He said, "Just get in the taxi." So we all jumped in. We drove out fast through the other side of the village to get out of the area. And he later told us they were yelling. They're looking for the gold. They're looking for the treasure. Ever since that one grave was robbed in 83 or 84, Mrs. Noah's grave or whatever. This grave started this rumor that the area is full of treasure. So now, whenever you're out there, people get suspicious. Like, what are you here for? Are you looking for more jewelry, which is ours? We live here, you don't. But so, other than that village, everyone else has been very hospitable, and just, they invite you in for chai, Turkish tea, or even I've had people feed me like food, especially in Saudi Arabia. You're driving through the desert there around Mount Sinai, and you have these Bedouins will motion you to slow down and stop the truck. They'll come say, "Where are you from?" And, they'll broken English, or they'll say, like, "Who are you?" And it will say, "America." And I don't hide it. So, and they're like, "Ah, America, we love America." And so,
So,
like, in Arabic, you say "Ana Ameriki," I am American, and they're just very hospitable. They'll invite you to their tent, feed you goat or sheep, and
wow.
we got to know them. Um, yeah, it's
So
just so it's different. I've
tell us
never
about
had the issue.
Mount Sinai.
Oh, so that's one of my favorite topics, actually. Even though I live here in Turkey, and my first trip out here was to see Noah's Ark, the research of the Exodus account, and where Mount Sinai is, and what route of the Exodus, how did they get from point A to point B, from Egypt to wherever Mount Sinai is to the Promised Land. It's a logistics problem. It's a logical thing. It's a geography problem. You have to study the maps. They can't just walk over a cliff. They have to go through the valleys. And so I love logical stuff. And to me, that was really interesting to study even before I went there in 2016. That was one of my favorite things to study. And then